Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? We're pulling up our to-do app again. We got a haircut. I usually don't let it get so long. I tend to keep it shorter, but it might look like a little bit of a drastic change, but this is what I normally cut it at, and I have been for years. I don't mind it short, and that's how my wife likes it as well, so that's what I do. Anyways, to-do app. Thanks. I actually I've got a razor. I do 98% of it myself, and then I have my wife come in and clean up the little hairs that I missed. It's a lot cheaper than getting haircuts. I just need to make the actual time to do it, which is why it went, why it is such a drastic change. Looks like a greened snow. Doesn't show up there because they messaged before the stream started. Yes, we are going to be answering the question of why do we need WebSockets in our to-do app? And there's a couple pieces to it. It feels kind of weird at the first get, but this is sort of a specialized to-do app, so take it at surface value, I guess. Let's pop on over and we'll kind of lay out what we're planning on doing today. And actually, I guess that that brings up the point of why are we and what are we doing with this to-do app? I think I've got it. I might be able to just run it straight from here. We made a couple changes 2 streams ago, and then in using it, we actually 2 streams ago, and then in using it, I noticed a couple other bugs, and I think I've fixed those. And we can probably go to my desk is all kind of chaotic right now. Kiddo had their birthday party, so we had a lot of folks over this past weekend. So everything's a little bit shifted on my desk, which is just throwing off my vibes here. Okay, so nope, not local first today. We are doing stream to do. Whoop. It was also in Mac mode still. I use this keyboard. I've got a Keychron that has Bluetooth. And swapped up the switches, new keycaps. It's nice, but it's Bluetooth, and I switch between computers, and it has a Mac and Windows mode, which sometimes I forget to switch when I switch between computers, and then it flips the like Alt and Windows key, go to was it Command and Option on Mac. It messes with my head a little bit, but it's still you can use the keyboard in Mac mode on Windows, but then those keys are flip-flopped. Bust my brain sometimes. All right, so what do we got? We are on fix build failures, eh? I suppose we can go ahead and pull up the repo as well. And we did merge some things in. So let's go ahead and pull from the get checkout. Actually, I suppose I can do GCM, GFP. I got my aliases set up on this computer, which I still haven't actually gotten shifted over to the other computer, but that does get checkout whatever the default branch is, and then GFP is get fetch and then pull. All right. We could run a build first. I got it open already. So I want to run the To-Do app, but I also want to work on the To-Do app. So it's going to take a little bit of how do we do that in a way where they won't conflict? Because I can, with the way we have hard-coded the file paths, conflict right now. And it is not running. And I guess we can just try running it. Let's see if it actually works. I'm assuming this build will be good. I don't know if I've actually updated I have a version also installed on my system, but okay. So if I click, it opens up, sweet. And we need to do the new day. I'll get rid of that one. There we go. So I think this one will work. But then what we'll need to do in our app as we're working on it, just so they don't conflict and they use the same files, I'll just switch the default file name. It'll work. It'll get the job done. A little janky, but you know, that's what you got to do to get things working for the moment. We're also using the same app that we're building, but we want to use the production version and the non-production version. Anyways, so today what we are doing is we're pulling in WebSockets, and there's a reason for it. This To-Do app, well, we can add items to it. Like right now we are going through WebSockets. It's pretty typical, drag and drop. Hopefully I fixed all my drag and drop bugs, but you can drag and drop, reorder them, check them off. Pretty, like out of the box experience as far as that goes. The kicker here though is that the way I'm intending to use this is to tie it sort of like into the stream setup. If you've been on YouTube and seen the chapters where the video gets like chopped up and you can see different sections within the video, most folks will drop a specifically formatted list of timestamps, and that's how YouTube takes that and parses it and produces chapters. I think there's some like built-in functionality that they can do it automatically, but my channel must not be big enough for it to work, or just doesn't anymore. I'm not sure, but I keep looking down because I got cats eating below me and I don't want to step on them. So when we check off or otherwise complete to-do items and or shift them around, we're actually saving to the file system. And the intent behind that is that that coupled with a timestamp, it will allow me to at least more quickly copy and paste those items into some sort of chapter format that YouTube would be able to understand. We'll have to do a little bit of work still to make it a little bit easier to copy and paste, but at least I have like timestamps. So like I know what time I started the stream, and I know time zone, etc., etc. I can see the offset and figure out like what the timestamp in the video would be relative to when I click the button and save that actual timestamp. So we're just using like datetime to actually save in the file system. Here we go. So if we go into, I guess we can open up today's. This is the live one. So as we check stuff off, we'll put in the date timestamp here. So now, why WebSockets? And what Green showed, Green Snow said, instead you can invalidate the query upon changing the status of a task using React Query. Seriously, why do you need WebSockets? Are you serving video? There's a lot of depth in that question. for a few reasons. So no, we're not serving video, but I've seen folks use WebSockets as one of the ways within a Tauri app to deal with video. Because anytime you're going from Rust to JavaScript, if you're doing work in Rust and then pushing it to JavaScript to render, depending on how that's serialized, that could end up becoming a bottleneck. So I know some folks have experimented with using WebSockets to make that that data transfer. So do work in Rust, video, basically send frames to front end to view, and they've done that over WebSockets. So I suspect that that's part of where that question is coming from. But no, we're not doing video. The reason we want WebSockets is because the streaming software that I use, OBS, it's open broadcasting software, I think. It can run and does run a WebSocket server with my setup. I also use an app called Streamer.bot, which adds in a little bit more flavor into the stream, and allows me to. I've got pieces of the stream hooked up to that. Like if somebody types in any of those commands, that goes through Streamer.bot, and then gets picked up in the browser source that I have layered over the stream. So if you type in !drop, then I guess some of those commands probably. I mean, the 3D one, I don't know if the dot hide actually doesn't work anymore. I think we took that off. The 3D one is intended to work, but I think we broke it into moving stuff around. But the power up and the drop still work. The power up is actually done purely with like OBS and shaders with a couple plugins. And the drop is actually WebGL. That's hitting a browser source, effectively a web view, very similar to what Tauri app might have. Not quite, but like conceptually the same idea. So normally WebSockets would make not a lick of sense. There's no real good reason to use it in a simple to do app, but we're not really doing a simple to do app. This is specifically intended to tie into the my broadcasting software so as to grab information from the stream or potentially from this streamer.bot. And in doing that, we can add additional information within here and potentially make this easier to copy and paste. So like one of the things that would be helpful would be instead of having timestamps, having instead of having date time values, have timestamps relative to when the video started instead. So you check a box, it checks it off in this list. That list will then reflect that it was checked off at 15 minutes into the stream. That's a lot easier for me to copy and paste, and I might need to massage it a little bit, but it's a lot faster to copy and paste. So that's the reason that we want to get WebSockets, is to grab additional context from basically my streaming setup. Now, what's interesting about this is we kind of have two use cases. There's if you've implemented or used WebSockets before, say if you've wired it up with Supabase. Supabase is a like Postgres as a lots of services / API over the top of it. One of the things it does is real-time updates, and that happens over WebSockets. So what you're doing is you're, as a WebSocket, subscribing to this service, and anytime there's an update, they push a message over the WebSockets. It's kind of one direction. You're just getting updates and then doing whatever you need to do with them. In our case here, we kind of don't need that. At least not at the get, but we might want to like pull out information. Potentially we have cases where we want to push information. So a potential use case would be anytime we answer a question on stream, that could theoretically become a to-do item. If I click a button in streamer.bot, or if I, make a marker in OBS or something like that, that could potentially show up in our list just to reflect that we digressed. So it'll be kind of interesting to put this in here because it's not a terribly involved use case, but we're potentially using it in both directions. So we'll have to think about that a little bit, and that sort of like reflects on how we should implement it. So as that is, I'm going to say we cross that one off. The next bit that I kind of want to touch on is where do we handle the WebSockets, JS or Rust? And now the reason that matters, you can see here, it updated, we get our timestamp. Like this ends up being really useful for me to copy and paste into the chapter markers. But also like, as we're talking about stuff, this is a quick way to kind of keep me organized, and for other folks jumping into the middle of the stream, they can see where we've been and where we're potentially going. So where do we handle the WebSockets? The reason this matters is the default plugin within Tauri. I don't know if default is the right word. The plugin that you might install from the plugin workspace, it looks kind of like WebSockets, but it's not quite, because the WebSockets are actually implemented in Rust. So what we're doing here is we're actually just setting up a listener and listening for those events. So it's, well, technically a WebSocket connection. That connection doesn't actually happen within the web view. We're telling Rust to handle this connection for us, and then basically just give us events, and then we can potentially send as well. So it's like WebSockets, but not quite. So if we wanted to do something with that, we would not be able to use like out of the box WebSocket client handler type things. This is going to be a little bit more raw WebSocket type connection. Now, the reason that can be of value is that if you're working with WebSockets, there's potentially security issues there. So any communication over open channels, somebody could potentially read it. If you're in a private network, sure, it's probably not as big of a deal. But if you're making a production app, you don't want to make that assumption that everybody's using it within a private network. If somebody goes to a coffee shop, you don't want to prevent them from using your app. So having it locked down is valuable. And doing that through Rust provides a more handlers. Handlers isn't a good word. It gives you more options to actually lock it down, is probably the better way to say it. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to have something always 100% secure, but it's potentially more secure if you do it in Rust. The other big reason, so like security is always going to be a thing to consider. How much that matters might depend more on your app. Like caring about security should always be something on the to-do list. The different levels and types of security and how they're handled may be lower or higher priority. They're never like off the list. So the other reason to use this plugin / do it in Rust would be if you have multiple windows. Say if you have an app which has a main window and 5 widgets, those widgets might actually need context or be able to have some sort of connection to that WebSocket endpoint. So you might have a widget specifically intended to display ongoing information, like events. Every time you get a message, you might have a widget that you want to show those messages. But then your main app also needs that context. So if you did WebSockets within the web view, they're going to have to make that connection from every web view. So if you have 5 windows, now you have 5 connections to the WebSocket endpoint per app. Already as it is, since a WebSocket needs to maintain a consistent connection, it's harder to scale than some other setups. Just throwing up like an HTTP server, the loads and the way you handle those like multiple clients changes as compared to setting up a WebSocket server, because a WebSocket server needs to have clients that are directly connected to it effectively. So if you put your WebSocket connection in Rust, you have one connection, and your web views are just dealing with it as it would data. You can handle the whole setup in Rust, and then just your web view becomes more view than it does this type of connection. Make the connection once, let Rust handle it, deliver the data where it needs to go. So that's the reason to use this. In our case, I'm already making a connection to a WebSocket endpoint that's on my local network, like on my local machine. I'm not even going like on the network theoretically. So putting my WebSocket connection in Rust purely for security is going to matter less, because I'm already connecting to myself effectively within the same computer. And I don't know if y'all have seen stream setups. They tend not to be terribly mobile, unless you're doing like IRL streaming. Like that's a whole different use case. That's not a. If you're doing IRL, you're probably not doing this. So I think that's less of a deal. The other issue is that if we're going to use this plugin, it means that we can't use any clients or have any, take any piece like off the shelf that it was originally written for the browser. So I think all of that being said, how we're going to end up implementing it is within JavaScript. I don't see a strong reason to use Rust, and we'll just complicate matters more. We'll have to roll more custom code, which I don't want to do. So we are going to do that in JavaScript. And these time, what is with these time? I don't know if I like this completed. I need to like have it re-render more often or something, because that's going to bother me, but whatever. So what we're going to look at is we've pulled in a library called Starfx, and it is in some ways a spiritual successor to Redux Saga. So React, Redux, Redux Saga. This is spiritual successor to it. So we're sort of like in the branches on the tree. It uses pieces from React Redux, so it's not too far off of a type of integration of how Redux Saga might have looked. Now, I think what we end up doing, because we're going to want that context in those same in the same areas or in the same locations. We've discussed it a little bit on stream, and then I also brought up some of this off stream as well. I think I think maybe we might want to like play around with a new API in Starfx. So if we're going to do that, we probably want to do a patch just to get ourselves rolling and see if it's something that we want to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull in patch package, which is something that will help us with handling working in node modules in a way that scales a little bit better and allows us to be a little bit freeform in our changes. And then when we have something that feels good, then we can push that upstream. And after we pull in package, then we're gonna check out Starfx and discuss the new API. It hasn't, to be clear, we're doing a little, it's a little experimental. So we'll see a little bit how I do. In some ways, this isn't how all upstream dev that I do works, but this is one of the ways, and it's convenient to do it this way because we can work locally, check things out, get a good feel for what the API should be, and then we can make a proposal or open up a PR upstream that's more direct to what we expect or what we think is going to be the best API. So once we play around with that API, then we're gonna pull in the WebSocket connection. I guess as part of that, though, we want to let's say check out the effection-contrib. We'll put a pin in that because we're going to end up going through that a little bit deeper. But I think what we do to save us a little bit of work in making and maintaining that WebSocket connection, we pull in a little bit of a helper to do that for us. Then we need to, I guess, pull up the docs for OBS WebSockets. And I don't know if we'll be able to get this far, but make a connection to OBS, get a timestamp. No, get the current timestamp. So what we could do then is if you have WebSocket connection and it is live, when we're adding a to-do item, or rather when we're checking off a to-do item, save the timestamp instead of the date time. I think that'll work. It would be a little bit nice to save or otherwise keep both pieces of data, because potentially something could happen and some of them, like if you lose a WebSocket connection halfway through a stream, it would be unfortunate that half the items that we checked off don't have a value. So even if we just like save the date time as a backup, that might be nice. But we'll have to figure out like what that looks like when we write it out into the file itself. It might take a little bit of thought, but we can roll with that. So I think this is what we're gonna end up going through. Let's pull in patch package, and we'll kind of go from there. Where, let's see. Yeah. Let's pull in patch package. First, before we start things up, I want to do I guess /next. Yes, I've got in two places, unfortunately, live, the name of a file basically hard coded. So as to not conflict with this, we're going to do it like this. So now we'll end up having two files once we start running this. And first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in patch package. It's been around for some time, and I don't think it has actually been updated for a little bit. But I don't think that's that big of an issue, because yeah, 2 years ago. Honestly though, it's kind of feature complete. I don't know that it needs anything more. So like if we look at the package JSON, I mean, I suppose we can look at the other one. It does have some dependencies. So like I could see that being reasons for why it might be useful to have this updated. Because honestly, like all these bits I don't really care about. I suspect cross spawn might be the only thing that really matters at this point. That being said though, the like functionality and what this is doing has been picked up in other places. So even if this doesn't get updated, the idea of this is going to live on in spirit. So yeah, this is probably the biggest kicker. If you're using PNMP, it has it. Like it's just built in. You don't need to use this. Use this. So that's what I mean. Like this idea lives on and will continue to live on in spirit, even if this package doesn't see any more updates. We happen to not be using PNMP on this project. We're using npm. Yeah, you can see here. So I don't think npm has anything built in yet. If we look at npm, I guess npm CLI. Yeah, nothing about patch. I don't think it's really on their radar either. So if you're using PNMP, don't use this package, but you'll end up doing the same basic things where you can run a command. It will give you a patch file. Oh, there's a patch dependencies field. That's kind of neat. And then whenever somebody grabs this repo, so the idea here is that you make a change in node modules. That's on your local machine. Somebody's not going to be able to use that. So we need to have some way so as to pull out the information around that change to then apply the same when somebody else installs your project. So what this does is it's doing like a git diff on your changes in node modules for that package and saving it in a file. Basically like I've seen like a .diff. I don't know if that's actually a or like a registered file extension. But it takes that diff, and next time you install or next time anybody else that grabs your repo and installs, when this patch or when the install is done, it will reapply the patch. So in this case, it's like built into PNMP. If you're using patch package, basically a post install script. So it gets done installing, then run this patch on top of it. So it basically puts the node module state in a known modified state for everybody. So we can effectively end up just mucking around in node modules, do whatever we need to do in here, save it as a patch, and then everybody else gets that too. So I can be free to delete my node modules if I need to, and then come back to it, and it will reinstall and still work in the same way that I had as we had previously modified it. So let's pull in let's pull in patch package. We just need is a dev dependency. And then we will end up looking in our node modules and we'll play around with Starfx. When we're done playing around with Starfx or in the process of doing that, we will run a command. Here. Well, I guess, sure. You need these. npm patch package and then the package name, and it will generate the diff file for us. So we can go into here and we can play around in the directory and modify things. We'll have to figure out. So this is publishing an ESM directory and it's publishing a script, which I'm presuming the script directory is main. Yes. So common.js is supposed to be script and ESM is supposed to be ESM. If you're unfamiliar with that terminology, there's the high level is there was a in some ways a fracture in the ecosystem. Common.js had the sort of the default assumption that loading modules and running them was sync. That was a synchronous process. ESM made that async. But it's really hard to make the conversion between the two because it's such a root assumption. And then that assumption gets baked into every library that's generated. So it's been a process to make that conversion to a ESM because that's becoming the new default node, at least. It's not been an easy time. So I think we'll end up going in the ESM directory. I'm not sure which one it ends up pulling in, but I have a feeling it's that. So what we'll do is we'll make some changes in the ESM directory and see what happens, basically. Now, I guess, okay, so this is the other bit. If we run npm run dev, okay, right now we have a list of stuff. I'm actually going to just make a backup of that file just in case. Because I don't think I've actually tried to run npm. Ooh, here we go. npm Tauri dev. I haven't actually tried to run two of these before. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work. So we shall see. The Vite and generating the front end should be fine. That ends up being served at the Vite dev server. It's going to be how it's registering and setting up and running the dev Rust part. We do have a couple flags in here right now. It will automatically open up DevTools. It will, I think it's using the Crab Nebula DevTools as well. It is also, okay. Now that's interesting. I actually don't know which one it is. We are getting the note that the hotkey is already registered. So like if we open up this, yep. I guess they use the same store. So if I do, so that one is the original one. What is this one? Okay, that one I can refresh. There we go. That one is now the live version. Okay, now they've split. Yeah, live. Okay. That might take That might take a little bit to get used to, but we'll make it work. To make it a little bit clearer too, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say decoration's true. That'll allow us to move it around. And then I could make a tweak too to just keep it open all the time. We might do that actually real quick here. If we go into our setup tray, I guess we don't want to hide. And then I guess too, let's just do visible true. So that'll get us a full rebuild. It should just start up. It will still do the tray thing, but it should stay, it'll open and it should stay open. There. So that'll give us some stuff to, or a place to iterate on. And what we want to then do is look at Starfx. So I guess we could pull the other one up. We've got package pulled in. So let's check out Starfx and look at the API that we've kind of been pitching back and forth. I guess we can go to github.com neurosnap/Starfx. I think we've talked about potentially pulling this out into like an actual org, but right now Neurosnap has it in their own org, which is fine. Now what we want to look at is, I think we end up putting it in thunks. A little bit of a recap. When you fire off an action, you're triggering a thunk. So your action is effectively like serialized JSON, like it's dispatched. So we're effectively like in some ways doing like a in-memory internal HTTP fetch. If we talk to a server over HTTP, we're doing that in a payload, JSON or stringified JSON. In some ways too, that's kind of what WebSockets is doing. But what, I guess this would be technically React Redux. It has a specification which says that this is a payload structure. When you fire off a dispatch, you're firing off that payload to something that can then process it. So it has a list of all of the handlers, which in this case are thunks, and those thunks then know how to process that payload based off of what you've registered. There's also the create API, so api.ts. You can do create API or create thunk. But if we look at create API, we are using thunks. So thunk is that base layer. So when you think about an API, building on top of a thunk kind of makes sense, because what it's doing is it's putting some niceties on top of the dispatch handler that then allows you to make requests. So it just papers over some of the work that you would normally have to do in setting that up. So instead of you having to specify the full URL every time, you can kind of like do a bunch of that work up front and add effectively like middleware handlers to this stack. So every time you do a create API, which is effectively create thunk, you're introducing a new stack, or new like middleware stack that a dispatch could potentially run through. Every handler, I guess, every like .used thing in that middleware stack will run. And then at the end of it, you call next. So it's if you've used like Express or any of those server type frameworks, it kind of feels like that, which actually works pretty well for these use cases, because you can do In this case, they've got a create thunk, then the routes, and then they have just a helper function. And all this is doing is literally just like dropping some logs. But you can do any kind of processing you want in there. We can potentially do our WebSocket connection just directly like this. Now, the reason I'm looking at modifying it is I think it potentially makes sense to have an additional API instead of just .use. Instead, do like a .manage. And the reason that feels like a good API is because .use is more of a thing to handler generator function that gets called when you dispatch. But a WebSocket is a live connection and something that you potentially want to start and let live, and you might potentially need like a reconnect. So just having it as like a one-off function that fires doesn't really work, because you don't want to like remake the connection every time you dispatch to it. You also do want to listen. There's that two-way communication. So some of this starts to fall back to effection, which is part of what Starfx is built on top of. And that has an API called resources, which allow you to write something that has like a persistent connection or some sort of persistence and will run outside of its like specific scope. The high level of effection is structured concurrency is what it's called on the box. That's a like generic programming term, which is less common in the front end ecosystem, but it is much more common in other languages. I feel like Go and Swift seem like they've been talking about it a lot. But what's nice about it is you can write a function, and it uses generators under the hood. But you can write a function that, I guess, a generator, to where when your code is done running, once that function goes outside of the scope, everything in there gets cleaned up. So if you have a whole bunch of services that are all running in parallel, and the root service says, hey, it's time to shut down, all these pieces will effectively like go out of scope and then clean themselves up. So it's a much more controlled way of handling asynchronous type processes, as in like the alternative being promise, which is kind of a fire and hope. Fire off the promise and hope that it returns. Now there are some newer APIs like abort controller that tried to help that situation out, but it doesn't seem very common to implement it, and it's kind of a pain lacing it through everything and getting that handler in a place where it makes sense to handle the like shut down and clean up that process. So the encapsulation of effection feels really nice. But the problem is this is taking like a function that just runs. So once anything inside here runs and goes out of scope, it's just going to clean it up, which isn't really what we want. We want this thing to like live outside of its the function running. So we could write a function which return, or we could write a generator, I guess, which returns another generator. But then you still like run all of that code and it's kind of gone out of scope. So you can't bake in the other niceties like reconnects, and getting those handlers where they need to go is a little bit more involved. So what we're looking at doing, long story short, in Starfx, I think it makes sense to potentially add an API outside of just this .use, which if we scroll down here, all this is doing is adding a function under the middleware stack. So if we look at middleware, it's calling this compose, which I think is another function in this library. Yep. Guess we should probably. Is it actually? 2 levels. Whoop. Okay, so 1, 2, compose. Here we go. So what this is doing is it's for each function in the middleware, if it's not a function, then throw. So like right now it has to be a function. And then that's the piece that handles that dispatch stuff. So in your middleware, you need to call next. And that next is what like triggers the state change. And that actual dispatch. Which I guess is just this, right? So yield dispatch. Compose. So this is returning a context and middleware. And yeah, okay. So it's just like looping through effectively that middleware stack and executing them. So what I think potentially makes sense is going in here and just hopefully it's not too big of a deal. But I think we can chuck in an additional API that's kind of like the use, except it takes a resource. And that resource is an effection thing, which also has an effection scope. So we could put information on that effection scope, which could then be pulled from anything that has that or is scoped in that same like process tree. Maybe process isn't the right word. But if you create a scope and then any work that you do in here would be able to access that same scope. So we could potentially do like an app.manage or thunk.manage that takes a resource and then puts that resource in a place where any place within our thunks we could use it. So we want to be able to like use that resource in the actual middleware, like anywhere within that middleware stack. So that's part one. But also we want to, we want to listen for any events. So if the WebSocket server is trying to send us information, we want to be able to take that and process it as well. Which there's another API where we can kind of do that now anyways. But it ends up being separate. So you end up having to like put these things in 2 places and it's just not it's not terribly convenient. So we can do in our setup, we call store.run. So this is basically like the run loop of this process. Run all these tasks in parallel, and then they end up just persisting, presuming you write them that way. This will just continue to loop. Every time we see a dispatched action, log it out, restart the loop, and wait. So you can have, in theory, any number of tasks just running in parallel. But it's kind of inconvenient to like get it wired up in one spot to be able to send messages out, but then also have that same wiring connect back somewhere in here to where we can pipe into the tasks. So we could do it without changing any of the APIs, which is kind of neat. Like Starfx has the flexibility, I think, to support it, but it wouldn't feel convenient and we wouldn't be able to take stuff off the shelf. So I think what we end up doing is we try adding in app.manage and just see how that goes. Because in theory, we can basically just have a, like there's already a watcher, there's a supervise, a thing that handles and starts the task. We could effectively just yeah, so we register the thunk, and like once the thunk's registered, we could just start the task in here. So we can have the task just automatically wired up effectively. But then also have the ability to pipe that context wherever we might need it. So I think we ended up just adding in a new API here and see how that feels. All of that being said, I think we go here and we're gonna pull in the effection-contrib. Or we'll look at it and I guess these are kind of in the same. Let's check out the effection-contrib, and then that'll end up leading to us pulling in the Websocket connection. And the reason, or one of the reasons that I think supporting resources in Starfx would be nice is there has been work in this repo, which is taking, is this site live? We might have actually pushed it live. Yeah, nice. Good work, Tross. Effection at the base of it is a rather small lib that kind of coordinates and handles these bits. You can do a lot with it. Some of them can get more involved, but like we looked at task buffer a couple weeks ago, maybe implementing it in effection in a way that it cleans up and reconnects and does all the stuff nicely would normally take a lot of code if you're writing it with like promises or other JavaScript APIs. When you do it with the effection, like there's not a ton of code. You could do all of these little bits yourself, but just having somebody have already figured this out to where you can just use it, that's also kind of nice. But it didn't in the past. Some of these bits were like included in the main effection repo, but like these kind of run at a different pace than the core effection. So like tiny exec could be implemented in both v3, which is the current latest, but then also v4, which is the upcoming one, and they could be maintained separately and all at different cadences than the rest of like effection, the core effection. So it kind of made sense to like pull these pieces out, because then it also means that they're a little bit more copy and pastable if that's the way that you would prefer. In part because these also end up serving as pretty decent examples. So like this FX, what do we all have in here? Parallel, safe, race map, request, and JSON. These are all like little bits that we pulled out of Starfx. So the next, like either the next version of or one of the further on versions of Starfx, rather than maintaining all of the code in this folder, that's been upstreamed in effection-contrib. We can just pull it in as a dependency. So now you have more folks looking at some of these, what are in some ways core pieces, but not really like core to effection working. So I think this setup will end up being nice. It feels like it's going to be a good result. That being said, you notice that there's a WebSocket one. Where, ooh, interesting. That is a bug. We will have to deal with that, but we can effectively do this. So this takes a it's either bare string or function. So I'm presuming that the function is the way, like if you're doing a if you're using like a WebSocket client, I'm guessing that's probably the case where you would do this. Oh, okay, maybe not. Well, kind of. I don't know if that's the only use case. You might be able to use this, do it this way for clients as well, but that's TBD. Either way, we can end up like pulling this in and then working with the WebSockets. But this use WebSocket, that is a resource. We might not be able to use this directly off the shelf. This is actually on, yeah, so this is V2 because it's using effection v4. Do we have a tag? Can we, yeah. WebSocket. I guess if we go to WebSocket 101, that's probably the easiest way to do it. And I say that because this means that we're on V3. Starfx is based on V3. But if you look in here, there's not a whole ton of code. We could, in theory, just copy and paste this. And if you've done like raw sockets before, these bits probably look somewhat familiar. You know, wait for open, throw if you get an error, do some stuff with that actual socket then. Listen for messages and then close, or you know, like clean up after the socket closes. Alex, thanks for stopping by. What's affection? It is, we're like a little bit in the weeds right now, but it is a library that my employer puts out. It's structured concurrency is the buzzword. It's less common on the front end. This like terminology, or this, not really use case, but like this as a pattern is less common on the front end, I've found. It's built on top of generators, and it makes generators nice to work with. And the idea is that it gives you greater control, or greater control flow. So once a function, I guess in this case technically a generator or an operation, goes out of scope, you can have basically a process like clean that all up for you. So it makes it nicer to encapsulate your functions and be confident that like you don't have zombie processes. Or on the front end, it's another way to think about like complex state changes, or state, not as in like state library necessarily, but like state as in like your app needs to do some things or clean some things up when other bits happen. I've used it a lot in dev tools. I've used a lot in like backend type code because it's nice there in cleaning up zombie processes, or preventing them would probably be the better way to say it. I wrote a library called Covector, which handles publishing packages, and we use that in the Tauri org for publishing most bits, because we're publishing both Rust and JavaScript. And there wasn't really anything out there that could do that, which led to creating that library. It's built on, I think it might actually be on effection 2 right now. I'm actually in the process of upgrading it to effection v4 though. So neat library. Hop in the Discord if it's something that interests you. I enjoy working with it. And that is what Starfx, one of the pieces that Starfx is built on top of. Starfx is a spiritual successor to Redux Saga. Redux Saga being the state management, or well, state transition, maybe a better way to say it, library for React, which is built on top of generators as well. So all of that being said, we use in this app Starfx because the side effect handling is really nice, and having it process and run through a stack of middleware ends up working really well for this app. So we originally made it in more like pure React state, use React context. Then we pulled in React Spectrum, which is a library put out by folks that are at Adobe that has its own built-in state. We're doing a little bit more with this app than just like a generic to-do app. We're actually saving out to the file system and parsing it and pulling it back in. Doing that all with React context and the React daily was getting kind of difficult to handle. So I pulled in Starfx. I was familiar with it in other projects, and it felt like it would be a good fit for this. And now we're trying to stick WebSockets into it. So, effection-contrib, the WebSocket implementation. I'm thinking we can probably pull this in verbatim. I might just copy and paste it so we have more direct control over I'm not certain if OBS is going to be play well with this. But you can see here that what it's doing is it's returning a resource. So this whole thing ends up just being a resource, which is an effection functionality, wherever the imports are. Resource from effection. And a resource is a way to allow a process to live outside of its function scope, but then provide a handle to or ways to basically then clean that up in the future as needed. So when you run through the generator, or I suppose I should use the word operation, because it's not quite a generator. Like a generator, you have to call .next on over and over and over. But effection is doing and handling a lot of that for you internally. So you end up not really using generators like a generator. It's a little bit more, I think we've got that's taken some time to be bust the cache or something. Ooh. There is here. We're still using JavaScript. It is very much JavaScript patterns, but you can't use async await, at least not directly. There's a little bit of a the way to tie these pieces together, but functionally, how you end up using await normally, you just replace yield star, and you squint, and it's basically you're using it in the same way. And then effection handles that, the .next, all the stuff that normally would come with generators. So that being said, once a operation / generator goes out of scope, it will do all the cleanup and get rid of all the processes and call whatever APIs you've specifically written into it. When we're doing a WebSocket, that's not what we want. We want that WebSocket connection to start, and then what we want to do is return giving handles to still interact with that WebSocket and for that WebSocket to continue and then potentially restart itself or reconnect if it needs to. So by specifying it as a resource, that is effectively like hoisting that scope up into its parent. So then the parent has more like direct access or to be able to control that resource. But when that parent goes out of scope, then the resource gets shut down and cleaned up. So you don't lose anything by using resources. It just allows you to basically make pieces of or scopes persist past when they would normally be cleaned up. So you can see we end up using it. I guess this would technically be like a Node.js. You could effectively use it very much in the same way as a like normal WebSocket implementation. The only kicker is that you kind of need it within a generator, which means that you probably need an effection scope, which complicates things a little bit. So it's not going to be something that you can just like, you won't be able to copy and paste this and drop it in your web app. You'll need to wrap things a little bit. But Starfx has a lot of that work done for us already. So let's go ahead. I think I'm just going to we've looked at it, effection-contrib. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull it in. I'm going to just copy and paste it though, because I think we might end up needing to chop this up a little bit. I guess we'll just grab the whole thing and then I'll rewrite a few bits of it. This is going to be something that ends up. I guess we just make a new file. So use websocket.ts. We'll just kind of drop it in here. Some of the TypeScript might not be. I guess we can need this too, eh? So like, there's not a ton of code here. We could write all this ourselves. It wouldn't be the end of the world. But also like, if somebody's done this and figured it out, why? But the reason we're doing this is I'm not sure what this connection is going to end up being like, and it'll at least let us play around with it. If we get into, because we're going to both be working in node modules, but also playing around with WebSocket implementation. So things might get a little messy, and being able to just tweak it on the fly here will be nice. So let's switch this out to be effection, and we will drop these in here and boom. Okay. Seems like there might be a little TypeScript, at least with whatever setup we have, that it might not like, but I don't think that's going to be a big deal. We'll come back to that though. So this is at least in a place where we could pull it in and start using it. Can you ask something a little off topic, but regarding Tauri? Yeah, go for it. I'm always down for questions. We can put a pin on what we're working on and digging into the question a little bit. Happy to do that. So in our foundation is where we're doing the create thunks. So I think what we end up wanting to do is something like thunks.manage, and it'll end up being something like use WebSocket, and it takes the URL. So this will be something, yeah, something like this. I don't know. I actually wonder if that'll work. Like, will that connection actually start? Some of the example stuff actually does work, and it's specifically put out there to um, basically like let people play around with it. Obviously, it's going to fail because we've got an API that we're trying to use that we haven't actually implemented yet. But okay, so interesting. So Alex is asking about microphone permissions. Now I haven't personally actually let's check off this first. Yep. I haven't personally done too much with or any, honestly. I don't know that I've actually touched the microphone permissions. But I'm as far as I know, the microphone permissions work very similarly to some of the other permissions. There is I'm trying to think. I guess I don't have an example of the actual like pop up. If we go to maybe we have something in here. I don't think we have any real plugins for it either, but I think like if you're just hanging it in a browser, right, you get the pop up that says, "Can you use your camera or can you use a microphone?" That's built into the web view. So there are other pieces or other places too where we end up needing to do something similar. Like in notifications has the same idea of like, is the permission granted? Because this is an OS level thing. I don't remember what that pop-up looks like though. And the oh yeah, sure, you can share a thread. There is I forgot to grab a link. How do I okay, copy URL maybe? Copy video URL. There we go. Do I have okay, I don't know what we're gonna flippity floppity here real quick. Normally I post on Discord. There's a thread in Showcase that I chuck updates. Forgot to mention that we started. I think that link will work. Yes, it looks like it does. Check in the Showcases channel in Discord and Tauri. I just dropped a link to the YouTube video or the stream, whatever, the thing you're watching. And it should have bumped up that to the top of the showcase section. So if you drop it in that thread, I'll see it. Others, I guess you can mention me. Yes, so native popover of the browser. The problem is that if somebody clicks deny, how do you deal with that? Which is a good question, because normally, like, if somebody wants to then go back and fix it, you like direct them to their browser settings or whatever, right? You'd say like go here and change the thing, because you can't get that pop-up to show up anymore, right? If we look at MDN microphone, so I think this get user media is applicable to both video and microphone. Yeah. I was hoping for an example, but okay, here. Get user media. Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I appreciate the examples, but also it doesn't say anything about it failing. There's also security stuff too. And I know like WebRTC was having issues on Linux because the WebRTC implementation in WebKit GTK wasn't up to snuff. Um, I think it'll still work I mean, it seems like it's coming up for you, so I'm assuming that it works, and we don't have to worry about the protocol being an issue. And yeah, so let's see if I can at least share part of it here. Whoa, nope, stop Windows. I do not want to snap. You're not being helpful. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, how do you... Got a fruit fly flying around here. Stop. Okay, is that a fruit fly even, or a gnat or something? Um, yeah, this does not feel like something that's going to be nice in V1. That makes sense. But also, if this is something that's core to your app, then that's going to bother me. I hope that. I think I got it now. But well, nope.
Your blue sky. Do you want me to share a different profile for you for anybody?
There we go. Okay. Audio was coming through. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. It was I switched my default browser and I forgot. I clicked the thing and then it opened up in my default browser, which I hadn't had it open yet actually. And it opened it up and started playing a video. I was I guess this morning I was watching Learn with Jason, and they were talking about RS Pack last week, and I was gonna hop in and check it out. The person working in RS Pack has worked a little bit with somebody on the Tauri board as well. They're doing like module federation stuff as well, which is a whole nother rabbit hole. Kind of neat, but I was watching that this morning and it opened in my default browser when I clicked the button. So anyways, yeah. I mean that makes sense. Basically we go into the web view and then we um and that would work for web view 2. Yeah, that looks awful. And I guess this is the other bit too, like if we got an API for WebView 2, Linux is not going to be fun. Yeah. Okay, so that's 2022. Yeah, so that's probably all V1 stuff. Oh, that's that same thread. Yep. Yeah. And I guess this kind of comes back to where do you handle stuff? So one of the things um one of the things that we kind of discussed when we first started the stream was the where do we handle the WebSockets, JS or Rust? If you pull in the plugin, the Tauri plugin for WebSockets, it actually handles those WebSockets in Rust. And we had kind of mentioned two driving reasons to do that. It would be potentially better security, not 100. It's not like 0 to 100%, but like you can potentially make it a little bit more secure in Rust. But then also you have the data available in Rust, which means that if you're using multiple windows, you can make that data available to every window rather than each window needing to make its own WebSocket connection. So that would be the reason to do JS versus Rust for WebSockets. In this case, what we're doing here is we're basically relying on the web view to handle the permissions and then like get access to and be that entry point for audio. If you're doing an app that is intended to work on, yeah, this is the other bit here. If you're doing an app that's intended to work in the browser, in a Tauri desktop app, and in a Tauri mobile app, that's going to be a heck of a time, because you then the fact that you're trying to do it as like on a web page means that you have to use the browser APIs, or just not have that feature in the browser version of your app. If you would go that route, or you only care about desktop/mobile, I wonder if you could just do it in Rust. If you get, because like it's going to depend what you're trying to do with that data. You could handle that connection in Rust, and then you're talking Rust to operating system. There's not really a web view to get in the way, and then the Rust side of things could then just pass that data right back to the web view. Because until, like, I think the unfortunate bit here is that there's going to be ways. Yeah, and you can just use web APIs. And like this is the other bit. If you're also doing a mobile app, then you might have to start dipping into Kotlin or Swift. Right? Yeah. And then like if you want to do WebRTC, like that's a different thing if you're saying microphone access for WebRTC. Now WebRTC is a whole different thing. You haven't tried it in Rust, you only cared about desktop. Like if this is seriously going to be an error or an issue, and you're not going to be able to have a way for somebody to like reset that easily, or go through all of this like you'll have to specifically make it an opt-in and make sure that they click OK, because otherwise it's going to be a pain to get them to reset it effectively. And even if you could do it through like there was that WebView 2 snippet. No, this is all Linux. Like this could technically work, but it's WebView 2, and you're doing like internal APIs. Now you have to make sure that this is staying up to date. I mean, maybe we could get something like this up into the like Tauri contrib or a Tauri plugin or something like that. But now WebView 2, WebKit GTK, etc., etc. Nobody's really going to want to take maintenance of that. Honestly, if that's really going to be a big issue, the first thing I would personally look at would be is there anything that we could pull in Rust that would like listen to? Play sounds over your microphone. Interesting. Yeah. Convert mic audio from speech to text. I mean, this is archive. Not actually saying use this one, but like we can look at it and see what they're using. So they're pulling in, like I think there's a couple audio crates, both audio and video crates. Noiseless. What's this? Audio denoising. Okay. Deep speech. Deep speech might be the actual deep speech. Mozilla's deep speech STTP or STT implementation. Yeah, so there. I mean, these are all like transcribers. So I'm guessing like within deep speech, what is the dependencies here? Like that's starting to actually get into C APIs. This might not be anything about recording audio though, which is I think oh okay. Oh, thank you. Hey Darth. Darth Buddha, how's it going? Yeah, it's a whole mess. Would CPAL work? CPAL is for cross platform audio library. Deep seeking, running on deep speech, not deep seek, but CPAL. Yeah, I saw that dependency in one of the other ones, right? Yeah, so like you could like this is the thing too. What's nice about using the web API is that it's going to paper over a lot of this like if I just want to get audio and I want to pipe it into someplace, like, okay, random use case, I want someone to turn on their microphone and be able to like move the thing depending on how loud they are. I need to get like the magnitude or something out of the mic, and that's it. And dealing with this for every platform, or at least a few of the desktop platforms, big sigh. If you could do it right in the browser, that would be nice. So, audio playback. It's a trip. A whole mess is probably a good way to describe it. Yes. Honestly, like maybe it's worth it's like that's the thing. Depending, it would be nice if we just had a nice API for this, but getting it in, dealing with the mess, and then being able to maintain the mess is a whole other thing. And convincing, like I think it would be really helpful for us to push more on getting more folks involved with the Tauri and Tauri ecosystem, which is sort of an obvious statement, but like we have been, but it's not easy. And figuring out how to best do that and then do it in a way which isn't just like trying to take advantage of people is difficult. So when you're ready, sort of like short on folks wanting to put in lots of time on things, asking somebody to maintain something like this without getting compensation is a big ask. So, you know, using Tauri, you'd probably use cPal on desktop and native APIs on mobile. Yeah, then you're adding on top of the mess. That and like that's the thing. Like, there's probably like 3 levels of use cases here, right? There's the I just want a little bit of the audio signature for something, just to make something interactive or like play around with. Um, and then there's the far end of the spectrum is I'm making a I don't know, like a vocoder, TSP, something, any of those audio terms, and I want to be able to like stream audio into other audio, etc., etc. Like you're probably going purely Rust for that, but also like that's going to be an involved desktop app just by itself. So the this window is blinking and it's driving me nuts. There's kind of a reason why some high level piece doesn't exist like this, because it's involved and it's kind of a mess. And it's not a situation where getting a like it's not a easy to pin down use case. The potential range of use cases is so wide that it's hard to make something that it's going to work for everybody. So then there's basically just all the low level pieces, and you're off on your own. I think probably the biggest bit is the how do we deal with this? And I'd actually be kind of curious. I don't know how like Electron or some of these other WebView type things deal with this. Uh, they're a little bit more like built into and have more direct control over like the Chromium embedded. So this might be less of an issue there because of that. So I'm kind of curious also, like there's been experiments to bring in Chrome embedded into Tauri, like as an opt-in thing. It was built in a way where we can have any number of potential like WebView sources or ways to create the WebView. So I wonder if that conversation is going to change, like if CEF comes into play or Servo comes into play, et cetera, et cetera. Does Electron even support mobile? No, I don't think it does. Yeah, then, React Native plus Electron seems to be the other, like, I want to write a web app, but not have it be a web app stack. Presuming you want to target both desktop and mobile. So, sorry, I don't think I have a good answer. Yeah. If you really need it and you're highly dependent on it, it's almost like you have to go with Rust or deal with maintaining so like there's Android might be a little bit easier to deal with actually. And like the WebRTC, so there's camera and microphone access, but then there's also WebRTC. Yeah, I think what you'd end up having to do would be have potentially some hacky workarounds to deal with it for the moment, which is unfortunate, but you know, it's reality. Sometimes architecture is gonna, like, sometimes architecture you choose is gonna pay dividends. In some ways, the ability to do the whole mobile thing in Tauri was, in, you know, early decisions drove the ability to support mobile that quickly. But also there's, you know, these kind of things too. So there's no silver bullets. What is it? No. What's that quote? There's no silver bullets, only oh gosh, what is it? There's no silver bullets, only silver bullet shaped thing. I don't remember. Silver linings? No. It's something with werewolves and silver bullets. Just imagine that I have some wisdom. Smart thing. Insert smart thing here. Nothing. There's going to be pros and cons to everything. And this seems to be one of those cons, specifically in implementing something like this, because it's, I mean, you can get it to work, but if they say no, ooh, yeah. Okay, so, bam. What are we at? We're at almost 2 hours. Let me double check that I don't have any pressing messages. Why are you going so slow, computer? Okay, I think we're probably good to go a little bit longer. Let's see if we can throw this in real quick. In app.manage, if we now pull in, what are we on? I guess pull in the WebSocket connection. I mean, I kind of did that, but let's do, I guess in reality, it's more like add the .manage API. We're kind of on that point. So if we look at the .manage and we open up Starfx, we should be able to maybe drop a log and get it to refresh. Where's Starfx? Here we go. And the reason I'm going to just drop a log in there from the get-go, I want to make sure that I'm actually editing the right file, because there's both the ESM and the create things. There's ESM and then there's the CommonJS version. This is the right file. So we're gonna just drop something in here. Let's get this thing to tell us something here. So this might not be the right one. Hey John, good to see you. Sorry, there's a Dartmouth quote for silver bullets and climate change. No, it was something with silver bullets and like werewolves. Like there's no such thing as silver bullets which kill werewolves, but there's werewolf shaped problems or something like that. Gosh, I mean, speaking of learning with Jason, I feel like that's a quote that he drops every so often. I think I heard it from them first. The premise of it is that there's no problem that's going to be solved by like there's nothing that's going to solve all problems, but there's problems that are shaped in a way where the thing you're working on could solve it. I think it's something like that. Either way, it doesn't matter. We did insert wise quote here. We've covered our bases, right? Okay, we want to check. Yes. Now let's try the other one, script. I'm not sure. Like I feel like in general it would end up pulling in the ESM for V, but in reality it doesn't seem like it does. Hi, folks. So let's just see which one, or if any of them work. Let's try restarting and seeing. People love to believe in silver bullets, but werewolves are just myths. Thanks, GPT. Nah, not quite. I guess. It's such a good quote, and normally I can drop it off the top of my head, but you know that goes sometimes. All right, so function create things. What in the heck? We are. So we got one in scripts and one in ESM, and we're doing both the thunks. We are calling. So it should log out when we call it create thunks. It might. Well, let's just take this out for the moment because I'm not certain if that's doing anything. Refresh. I still don't. What? I hope there's not like clearing out my old. Like that's still here, right? I'm afraid that I'm gonna end up just scrubbing my old or like the thing I actually care about. Okay. The reason I think this is happening is because they both have the same key and they're both using the store plugin. So the production version of my app is using the same like base to determine what thing to load as is the dev version, which is kind of unfortunate. But I suppose we could tweak that. That might be the right call here. Because we're loading from this store to-do files. To-do files live. There. So now it's going to pull from a completely different spot. That should hopefully help with that issue. And hopefully I didn't blitz my other this. We wanna keep that to-do list around. Okay, so app.manage. None of them are actually triggering. Why? So if I edit this, we should be we got one there that says hi, and we've got one there that says this is the right file. We're calling a function create. We call thunks doc or equals create thunks. So this whole thing should be called. We also have a .use. I can also just do is ESM question mark. Okay. Or is it CJS? Why is none of them logging out? That's weird. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them. Why is it not logging anything out? I mean, it's clearly loaded. Ooh. Oh. Vite does this cache thing too. That's gonna end up being a pain, isn't it? I actually remember we ran into this. I think it's this one. .v, because there's nothing vtemp. We ran into this, I think, on a different stream where I was like, oh, we can use patch package, and then every time we rerun it, Vite is it's got like a temporary directory that it does some stuff on, and then it is doing some sort of memoization, which I'm sure makes it faster, but also means that it's like caching it effectively. So we might end up having to, yeah, okay. So it's ESM. That's something at least. So if we do something like this, and we just say manage, that would then technically work for just adding it on if it wasn't a resource. And just take this off. In reality, I just want to kick the thing off. So if we look at function routes, so this is like we got middle mdw.error. I don't feel like that actually works. I wonder if that's just an API thing. Like I suspect if we take that off, it wouldn't make a difference. But then here, thunks.routes, we are doing this. So we've got some matching to match things up. The router to route things. Words. So I'm thinking that it's just going through the middleware stack. No, it's figuring out like which thing has been dispatched. And then dumping it through the middleware stack. Something like that. The register we call once. So this will now this register is called within the context of running the store, I believe. Where is it? Setup. So we do so here we're rehydrating, we start up, boot up. So boot up is register. That's what it is. So when we call boot up, we're actually doing this, which is register any things created. So yield to keep alive and then yield take every. And that take every is watching all the dispatches and then using that as a way to determine when to handle. And you can see, so we have an action context and an ID context. And this action context is coming from action.js. And here, this is, remember when we were talking about structured concurrency and cleanup? You can call a yield ensure. And when this function goes out of scope, this ensure will trigger. It's another way of doing like a try, catch, finally. Getting that finally to actually run when you shut down and clean up stuff is not not as easy as you might think. Sort of two methods to provide encapsulated code, which both starts itself and then is able to shut itself down too when it needs to. So when this function goes out of scope, then ensure will trigger and it will remove itself from the store map. But you can see we're basically in this register we are just adding it as a task. So effectively we have in our boot up already done something like this. So this piece that we would normally do to listen for WebSockets and operate off of them, we already have something that's kind of doing that. And this whole, I guess, create thunks is a function. Default middleware on API. So this is going to accepts a list of operation, calls them all with supervise. So supervise is going to keep this thing running, I think. So I don't know if let's just give that a shot. If we chuck in like a console.log right before keep alive. I'm just curious if this will rerun. The app.manage, if we put this API in, we would want to have a way, we would want to be able to give it a resource or like an array of resources that then get run and get run in parallel. So in here, we're already running all the tests in parallel. So it's like already part of this boot up sequence. So depending on how this register works, we could potentially tie that into this. So as long as, I guess we want two pieces. We need to figure out how to get the context into a place where we can use it. So a way to register that, the ability to like send messages through the WebSocket. But then we also want to be able to listen. So we need the thing to persist, and we need the thing to persist in a place where it's going to have context that we care about. Okay, so if I save in one of these files, okay, what if I just? It's gonna be annoying if I have to like delete the Vite cache every time. I wonder if there's a way I can just like turn the Vite cache off. So now if I save this, I don't know if it's actually doing anything or not. Okay, that is definitely going to be an annoyance. If we look at the Vite config, is there like a cache directory? I have a feeling it's probably in one of these. What's mode? That's not helpful. Okay. It'll be kind of annoying if we have to like restart this every time. So we might have to, we might end up having to like figure something else out. like we might want to look at okay, right before keep alive. So if I do hello, well that wasn't hello, but you know. It seems like it's right before. If we do a, so this must actually go out of scope. So we're running the task. I have a feeling after take every. So we're giving it the visors, which is that's kind of funny. Where do we modify that? Okay, so we add some visors in the create. So that must be called sometime like within the startup sequence. Because we don't actually see it until we do like a thunk-stop boot up. So the boot up is calling the register, and the register is what's calling that. And it is doing two pieces at the end here: the keep alive for anything that it needs to supervise, and then the take every. But the take every, I think the take every suspends, as in it will never continue past this point. And I guess that's potentially one of the reasons that they're not doing like a try catch finally. If this is going to just hang around forever, the only way we can clean this up is if the insurers run and cleans it up for us. Right before keep alive. Yeah, so the take every I think is just sticking around. So the keep alive, a list of operations and calls them all with supervise. And supervise is the other bit that we can actually look at in our effection-contrib. I'm pretty sure we pushed this supervisor up. JSON parallel. Oh, maybe not. Maybe we didn't. Nope. Okay, so the supervise is still sticking around because it's. I think in some ways too, the supervise is a little bit more tied to Starfx implementation than the other pieces are. Let us hide that so I don't accidentally change that. Supervise is in mod. Supervise. So this is where you can see the while loop, and you'll see this come up a few times where, supervise is not spelled right. Kind of in the same vein of some of these, like within Tauri, you generate a web view, or you render the web view, whatever the terminology is. It has a render loop or event. Well, I guess it has both. It has, but it has the process like runs in a loop, and it just over and over and does the thing. So it needs to be the thing like controlling that main loop, which is why it took some work to allow the separation of the window from the web view, because originally they were more specifically tied together, and there wasn't a great way to share that app handle, because of the main loop and what was controlling it. And that's still a little bit of an issue. So like, which thing are you putting in the window that's going to control this like main loop? in the same way, you can have multiple loops here. So this is a while loop that, well, I guess this one technically is going to, at some point, it can finish. But like this one right here, this is never going to finish. This will run forever. But that's fine because we have it in its own like separate process. It's not going to actually block the main, the main render path necessarily. Because every time this moves past it, it'll just like restart it. So it's not like taking up the main process, and you're not going to get the case like if you use React and you forget to put something in the dependency, or if you forget to specify the dependency array for use effect, it just triggers over and over and over and over, and your browser crashes. You don't just like while loops aren't bad. It's just in some cases, if you can't control them, they're bad. Here we're controlling them by the fact that they're in these like parallel task runners. And this is like a built-in sleep effectively. The take is just waiting for a message and then it will continue. So it's not like re-executing the same thing over and over and over, which will eat up your CPU. So what we're doing here with this supervise is it will watch something and then restart it every time it and restart it when it exists. Yeah, I think that's got typo too. So it's going to watch something, and when it exits, then it's going to restart it. And potentially give up, which is the wait for. So once the wait for has been reached, then it just stops trying to supervise it. All right, and keep alive, accepts a list of operations and calls them all with supervise. Okay, so this is going to run in parallel a bunch of operations. It's going to supervise a whole bunch of operations. So it's putting every operation in the safe yield star. And if something does happen, then it dispatches an error. So we could potentially do this keep alive thing. Like if we do an app.manage, we could put the resource. We could potentially put the resource in there. Because these 2 bits are going to be running forever. This kicks off and is going to run a thing in parallel, and this is that group parallel. So keep alive, return results. So keep alive is going to return a list of so supervise operations.map. Yeah, so this is just going, it's going to wait for everything to wait, or it's going to wait for everything to complete before moving to the next yield point. Yeah, okay. So once we get the parallel, if we look back at, okay, we're in setup. Here, we are yielding. That was the piece I was forgetting about. We're yielding to this parallel, which will run all these things in parallel. And then we're yielding to the group. So we're waiting for all those tests to complete, but they're not going to. So it's going to effectively suspend because we have like these while loops built into it. So it's a thing. So this keep alive is using the parallel similar to what we're doing there, and it's going to just keep running until we hit that, until all of those complete. And then but the supervisors aren't blocking. It's basically like starting them up. I guess this would pass through once all of them fail. So do we get, does it actually go after keep alive? Keep alive. It's not immediately obvious if it's going to run after that. All right, let's try restarting this. And speaking of Vite cache stuff, delete and run. You've had a Vite cache issues here. There. Vite cache issues where Dina would pick it up, so you had to clear it. Pre-Dino 2, but maybe no longer an issue. Oh. So Vite would do the caching, and then Dina would try to pick up on the fact that that there was that cache. Ooh. Ew. Caches are hard. Getting them done right is not easy. All right, so right before Keep Alive. Okay, so Keep Alive will stick around. Does this ever get called? I wonder if this... So this was a bit that I was wondering. Like, if we have a thing that's supposed to be supervised, first of all, we need to make sure that the thing is registered before. No, we need to make sure that whatever the things we care about is going to be like in the list of supervisors before this is called. Secondly, I don't think this is actually called anywhere, which is maybe that's supposed to be an error state or something, but that might be an oversight. So we are dumping a bunch of stuff into the middleware with this use, and the use will then give us a stack every time we dispatch. It will like run through that stack of middleware. In here, this is the an API, which is the part of the supervisors here. So type, so that like stack of middleware is basically a store signal. Okay. This might be a little bit more involved than I was hoping for. What it's doing is it's basically this middleware stack, it's dropping it in as a thing to be supervised, in which case it will like restart if it breaks or fails or whatever up until some point, then it just fails and gives up. And then that like stack is listening, and anytime it sees a dispatched payload that has that satisfies this registered matcher, I think based off that routes, then it'll execute everything in the middleware stack for that specific use case. But really, with this app.manage, we just want to stick an additional thing in here, which I guess could work, because this could potentially be, again, an affection context. So let me just make a couple notes here. I think we might just try to drop a little piece in to see if we get some of it to work outside of this inline editing, and then maybe we'll kind of go from there. So add an effection context, which would be available in the middlewares. I guess let's put a to do in there. And I'm going to put a note here to do, does this even run? It doesn't appear to run. I think we probably need to deal with that. And then perhaps register any of the dot manage as another task or thing to be watched. So like that keep alive, I think it's just gonna run forever. But also like I don't really the managed, I don't know that it needs to be supervised. I think potentially we could. I think we could potentially just add it in. Similar here where we're saying middleware dot push. Here I think we could just do something like visors dot you know, I guess we need like a type, so thing managed. And this would more realistically be well, we'll say resource. So then in here we could do something like well, I guess at this point then this is going to have all the managed pieces as well, which should then just be available. And with this effection context, we'd be able to grab that, you know, like ascend wherever we needed it. Hey, Alan, good to see you. Something, two hard problems. Yep. Gotta love those quotes. John says, monorepo where subpackages was Dino, but the larger project was Node.js feet. Oh, ooh. The poly, I mean, I've used a fair number of polyglot. Okay, let's back up. A monorepo is multiple packages. A polyglot repo is multiple languages. A polyglot monorepo is multiple packages with multiple languages. I've used a fair number of them. I always feel like you end up running into weird situations like that because none of these things were really built with that expectation, but also it's so convenient having all the code in one spot. I don't know. Rod, am I saying your name right? Rachu? Rachao. I feel like I'm mispronouncing it. Please correct me if I am. Rachao. You added a global hotkey a couple of days ago, but you keep getting this error and then you moved on. I have it working. If you have a specific question, I might be able to answer it. The thing I would watch out for is the permissions. When you try to do it, so this is the dev. I've actually I have running 2 instances running right now. I've got this is the production version. This is the thing that we're working on right now, the dev version. It's trying to register the same shortcut. So my dev version is throwing an error because this already is using it, which is fine. But that's what I watch out for. Check if there's an error. It's either going to be if it's been registered or permission error. Those are probably going to be the big 2 reasons that I ran into. Hyper poly mono aqua fugi, to paraphrase a P-Funk. That is, say that 5 times fast. Yeah. I already need to like, I think I do this thing where I sort of talk to myself, which happens to work out well for streaming because me talking to myself is basically, technically I'm not talking to myself, I'm talking to the people watching, y'all. So it works. But if I start to get into like kind of talking to myself mode, then I don't actually need to verbalize everything. So then I just start to mumble. So I need to be very much like cognizant of the fact that yes, technically I'm talking to myself, but I also need to enunciate, because otherwise I get into the mumbling where I try to say hyperpolymono akabuki. Communication is hard, y'all. Communication is hard. And it is different for everybody. That's what I always tell the kiddos. Everybody's different. Yeah. Do the power up. That would be perfect. Exclamation mark power up. So the I think we would do something like this. We might pull it up in the next stream, but we're already at like a little bit over 2.5. That sounded really bad, probably over the mic. Sorry. It's little things. It's little things. Okay, I think what we're gonna do. So we're talking about it in the front side Discord, because we've got a Starfx channel there, as it does use a fair amount of. It does use a fair amount of effection. So as we were talking through it, we were saying something like, looking at it on the side. I'm not just like looking off into the distance. Where are they using this create type seconds from? I think I'm just going to try copying and pasting a bit that I know is going to here. I think maybe we just pull this in and give this a shot real quick. Because I suspect something like this might also work too. It's not going to be quite as nice because our outer piece is a function, in which case anything within that outer piece needs to do async await. And then we get into this like trap where this kind of works, but we're using .run, so we have like effection context within effection. It's not the best, but like functionally, I think this will get the point across. It won't handle retries. It's not going to be the cleanest implementation, but functionally, I think it might do something. Which might be good enough for right now. Okay, so this is, oh. It needs to be a function because it's putting the function on. Okay, well, that's not, we can't actually await. Can I just return? Oh, we're returning a function though. Ew. Yeah, so this is where it gets sticky, because the nice thing about effection is that like the control flow is really nice, but kind of in the same way, like if you've ever used async await, you've written all of your code synchronous, and then you get to one of the like lower level internal functions, like way down in your tree or up in your tree, whatever. You try to make that thing, like, well, what if I just make this function async? But now, like, anything that calls it needs to deal with that. And it kind of like infects your code to where everything then ends up being async, which is where I think sort of the drive to do ESM came from. If we need to make everything async anyways, why don't we just load everything, presuming the module from the get-go is going to be async? It kind of becomes infectious, which not in like a nice way, in a this sucks, now I have to rewrite everything kind of way. Affection's like that a little bit, to where you kind of want an outer effection context. So there's like a main or a .run, and like in the case of Starfx, it's doing a store.run, and like this is the main effection context effectively. You're calling parallel tasks, and that like this is running everything here. In the context of store, which then has some other middleware store bits to it. So here we're effectively, with run, we're creating a new effection context, which isn't great. But also, like, this needs to be a function because it's not inside in an effection scope yet. It gets called here, and then we're pushing it onto the stack here. So does this take what we're calling middleware.push middleware? What does middleware expect? Compose. It says it takes wrong button. There we go. Compose. But we don't want DTS. We want compose.js. So compose takes a bunch of middleware, and it is looping through each function. So it's going to throw. If we give it a generator, I don't think it's going to be happy. But I think technically it would actually work, because when it then gets executed, it's executing in the, this is technically an affection context, I believe. Because on API, there's a bunch of nesting in here. So like I think that's technically would work. So what's neat also about affection is you have to think about the affection scope a little bit for it to like correctly handle the scope in the generators and whatnot, which is a thing. But if you're doing something very basic, it's not as big of a deal. And like just calling the .run would be, functionally that would be fine. Just because you're doing an operation, if that needs to do asynchronous type work, it will handle it. If it needs to do synchronous work, it will just immediately execute it. So it's kind of it's a neat paradigm, because if you go async await, it becomes infectious, and then you have sort of that like async await overhead. There's like performance, and the way things are run within async await isn't super intuitive. Normally it doesn't matter, but if you're like writing really performance sensitive code, that kind of micro task type work could start to matter. Especially with V4, if we did a bunch of work with figuring out performance profiles and that kind of thing, getting it on par with running like pure generators. So I'm kind of excited about that, because the fact that it can handle basically anything. And then you could end up running it in CJS or ESM. It's kind of neat. But anyways, we digress. I think it needs an actual, like the outer scope needs to be a function. So I don't think we can actually do an await, because that I mean, maybe it'll work. It is executing it though. So where does the function, so let function if middleware length. Okay, so it's is yielding to the function. So the function could be this. I don't know that this is actually what we want to do, but what if we do this and we await it, because we have top level await here. It might complain a bit, but I'm just curious. We don't have those, which is fine. So we'll just say any and any. Let's just see. Let's see where we're at with stuff. So this is actually doing the socket, and this is using that same socket that we had pulled in. So it is actually using the resource. In this case, it's just wrapped a little bit awkwardly. And it tries to do a connection. And then we're getting like WebSocket error stuff. So that is a good sign. I'm going to just check these pieces off. How much time are we at? 2.5. Let's try to pull up the OBS docs real quick and see if we can get some OBS WebSocket Connection. This is not helpful. They moved, it used to be in a separate repo and they moved it into the main one, I think. I don't know where that lives now. We might have to like, can we just go into OBS WebSockets 2 months? 2 years ago. That little gnat. Where there's like a little gnat flying around, and occasionally it just flies right in front of my face, and I can't catch it. Okay, this looks not so much fun. It is doing. Let's see what. Do I hit my main instance? That's the other bit. Does that classify as a hardware bug? Ding the bell. Okay, so I've got apparently authentication on. I don't want to turn that off because I have streamer.bot connected to it. Or where? Like this is all real low level stuff. I was hoping I could just get a couple things drop. Nice. We need to come back to that and add a few more things at some point. But not today, obviously. Because we are deep into, this is just like raw output from stuff. This isn't very doc-like, is it? Just, I guess, generated docs. Like I don't. All right, well, I can see that we're using this. This would hit my actual server, I think. I don't think it's going to let me because, yeah. So it's showing up. You can see right at the top there. It's doing something though. That's kind of good. Where, all right, object is not editable. Yeah, and this is why I wanted to pull it in. I wasn't sure if we would end up running into, so like here, we are throwing on an error here. Socket, so it's doing the socket. What's protocols? What are the protocols? Are you going to tell me? Protocol string, a single string array of strings representing, don't say protocols. The subprotocols that the client would like to use. Oh, really? For more details, see. We're going to finish that off. I don't know if that's like a HTTPS, HTTP type list of protocols, or if that's something else. So new WebSocket. Does this take, where does that protocols feed into? New WebSocket. So it is the second arg. A single server can implement multiple WebSocket sub-protocols. So this must be, okay. So it's kind of like a thing that the server also has to care about. Which is why they don't really have examples for it. I guess that makes sense. Okay, so like I could in theory to connect to streamer.bot. It's gonna take some work, I think, potentially to figure out the OBS, like actual OBS connection. Yeah, one of these days you're gonna add your stuff to your stream. Yeah, I feel that. We actually like this is new. If you're actually curious about this to do thing, Alan, you might actually be interested in it. And if I can steal your interest, I guess. Oh, I feel like I'm gonna my words aren't working anymore. We're hitting that point in the stream, I suppose. If I can steal your not interest, what is the word I'm looking for? Intent? No. Focus. Whatever. Like, it's cool and it mostly works. And if you want to add things, I would love it. Yeah, streamer brain is real. It's like, I don't know. Peak. Yeah. If I could pique your interest in playing around with and digging into it, there's probably things we could add to it that would be nifty. Here we'll give the quick overview. To-do list, tasks, clicking on off. You can move them around. It gives you a, where's my folder? Here. Let's open the live one. It then, well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted in VS Code. It opens, or it saves it in this format as a file, in which case now I can make timestamps. I mean, you're just on Twitch, right? So timestamps probably matter a little bit less to you. But um, check out Alan's stream on Twitch. Alan's notes are off the wall. You have what, like 5,000 notes or something like that, and you have a whole bunch from you're like publishing them to your site or something, right? And there's a whole like static site generator for it that Alan's been working on stream, and the like referential taking notes 11K bonkers. That's wild, dude. Um, like the way you like write everything down and are able to reference it, it's pretty neat. So even if you don't actually use the timestamps for like your videos or Twitch or whatever, I still I could see you potentially using this for other use cases. Anyways, okay, so it's making a connection. It's attempting to connect. We need to do the so this isn't going to handle the authentication, which kind of sucks. I don't really want to disable that, but also we would have to look at the raw WebSockets, I guess, to figure out how to do authentication. And or like I don't know that, like I think it's throwing an error because it's expecting an authentication code. So that first message that it's sending is a we're waiting for an error, and then we wait for socket open. I suspect the first message we need to be sending is the authentication, and that's, I suspect, why it's failing. But socket.add event listener. So what is the socket is, yeah, like this is the, if you bake all this stuff into a resource, and you could potentially wire it up with like a WebSocket client too, or allow this to take a WebSocket client. You end up getting some like nice pieces from it to where you can just, as long as we can get it in the effection context, we should be able to pull it out of the effection context and be able to send a message from like anywhere within our app, which is kind of nifty. Or at least in any of the things that implement that. So any of the middleware that's related to that, which is perfectly fine because I would only want to do fire off or dispatch an action and then have my middlewares take care of the actual functionality. So I'm guessing it's throwing an error in here somewhere. Let operation closed, spawn, yield. But we're not. Let message of yield each socket. So socket. Got it. Okay, so messages is a signal. We don't have one for errors. That feels weird. What if I just go like this? I don't know if it's gonna like get mad at me. Errors. Create signal, message event. That's just a type error. Where's message event come from? Ah. Oh, and then there's type. Okay. Got it. Different kind of message. Can we just do then a error? Console.error. Error. I think it's, I'm pretty certain it's thrown an error or something. And I don't think it's actually it's not getting through the whole process. I can tell it's not because my WebSocket server is saying that it's not. So, I'm guessing it's doing something around, or like it's hitting some kind of error that's expecting authentication, but I'm just not seeing the error. So we're yielding on the socket when we get an error. We're throwing on it, which is what we're seeing here. So that would be 131. Oh. I mean, let's just see if it actually gets any further. Nope. So here we're spawning off a subscription that gives you the iterable. I don't know that that's something feels funky about that. They might have fixed it in the recent release. But something feels funky about that. Yield race. Finally, socket closed. Let's add a couple logs and stuff around here. Finally, I guess. Okay, so it's actually getting to the end, and it's calling the finally, and then it's removing stuff. So the yield race is going to hold it open if we don't care about them. Well, TypeScript says we care about it. Closed is with the resolvers. With resolvers, I think that's like that. I don't know that exists anymore in v4 of affection. But with v3, this was a way to deal with promises, I believe. Or subscriptions. Resolve and reject. Something like that. Yeah, yield subscribers. I didn't have to use it too much, so I didn't dig into it too deeply. So maybe it actually isn't getting an error, and we are. I have a feeling that this is going to overwrite. Message. Console.log message. And then we'll do, yes, I guess I don't really care about close right now. But Kitty is coming to say hi. Okay, here's a message. Yeah, authentication challenge. So we're getting it, we're hitting it. I think we're in the like we need to figure out how and what OBS is expecting. And that is probably going to be a next time thing. Especially like looking at their docs. OBS Web. This might actually be connected via WebSockets, so we might be able to steal some code from here. New OBS WebSocket JS is a thing. And so this is the other part that I was kind of bringing up with. If we're doing a resource, we want to be able to, or just like in general, a WebSocket connection. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of these kind of things because, hi, what, coming up. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of these clients because doing this and setting it up is not insignificant. Yeah. So if we can pass this in as the, like if we could pass in a client to this use WebSocket, that might be kind of nice because then it could just handle everything for us, and then we get back the actual APIs that are built into these. Because it's both the fact that we need to connect, which is the thing to consider. But then everything's going to have its own like custom event handling or subscription handling and all the ways that you call it. Like if this has TypeScript that just tells us the options, that is going to be a lot faster to iterate on than if we had to do it all ourselves. So we could look at, actually, they might be using WebSocket package too. If we look at their dependencies here, they have WS. And the reason to do that would be if we open up WS, WS is WebSocket client and server implementation. So, and also there's isomorphic WS, which is something they also have. So this is specifically meant to only work on the server. So within Node, I don't think it has a WebSocket implementation like built into it like we would do following MDM docs. Calling a new WebSocket works in the browser, doesn't work in like a Node script. So we'd have to pull in something like this. If we were doing it in Node. But this is going to, going to use the global.websocket in the browsers. So if we look here, we could potentially see that, hey, look, they're doing, oh, they got some like old helpers here. They're doing some work to, oh, is that literally it that it's doing? Okay, well, I guess for the most part, we only then care about it WS. But I guess WS is only for the server, so then we don't care about any of that. So this would work both in a Node script, but also in the browser. We only care about the browser, so we don't need a bunch of the stuff that comes along with this. But also writing all of I'm sure one of these is going to have a whole bunch of work with it. Yeah, okay, so that they've got some base 64 for encoding, message packs. Base, what's base look like? I'm guessing one of these is going to have all. It's a little bit more than just calling new WebSocket. And so like this is the difference here is the this has got all of these helpers and whatnot, and it does some opcode stuff to handle the like auth and whatnot, which we would have to do. So either we use this client directly, or we try to do raw WebSockets, in which case we need to figure out how to do the password and then do this, which we could. This is basically where we are at right now. We're create the connection, and then we emit, and we have to identify ourselves. So we're not identifying ourselves, in which case it is throwing those errors. So this, we would have to do something like this. And this is where those docs, you can see here, op, WebSocket opcode identified. Yeah. It would be nice not to do this. But also we're bringing in a whole bunch of libraries to handle all this stuff. Hi, kitty. Oh, you got sick of just trying to get my attention. Yeah, hop right up on my lap, eh? So I think that's kind of where we're at. Let's look at our to-do list. We took a peek at the docs, and we started making a connection to OBS. We've got a connection firing off. And it's waiting for the authentication. So it's doing the authentication challenge stuff. That is going to take a little bit more work if we want to do these raw WebSockets, or we're pulling in something like this. The upside is we don't have to write this. The downside is there's a whole bunch of promises and other stuff that comes with it, which might just be worth if they have a WebSocket opcode, so types.js, like this would be the interesting bit. Yeah, if we grabbed this might do a good chunk of the work. If we can just use the interface, because this is basically the painful thing. Everything else is just raw WebSockets. This needs to though match up with OBS. So here you can see 3,300 lines, and it's not. I mean, there's documentation, so probably what, like 15 lines of arguments and stuff, 1,500 lines. Maybe less, 1,000. That's still a lot. We only really care about one value though, so but these are the bits I think that would be, if we just pulled out some of these, they've got pretty good docs, and then that might just give us enough of a connection where we could do raw WebSockets and do those couple bits we care about with one call that we actually care about, getting the time code, and that might be enough. The alternative, I guess, technically, is that we could use a connection to streamer.bot, but that means that if anybody else wants to use this, they would also have to run streamer.bot, which I'm not terribly keen on. Somebody running OBS is probably much more likely. I mean, and at the end of the day too, just even having these timestamps is nice. So like, it's not a hard requirement. So I think that's where we set it down for today. I might I think we pull it up next time and we try to do a little bit of the raw sockets. I might see, I think they've updated, well, they have updated it, but it's for effection version 4, and we still have version 3 here. So it might take a little bit of poking around, because we like this stuff might have changed a little bit, so we'll have to double check that. See if we can set up some raw sockets and at least just do the connection bit. And off stream, I might see if I can get some more of this app.manage wired up, because long term that's going to be nice. But we're starting to get into the weeds on this, and I don't want to dive into it too much. So I think that's where we're going to leave it. What do we? I think we have some like potential interesting topics coming up here soon. There's some more like local first libraries that I would like to get into. And there's been experiments to use like Chromium embedded within Tauri. It would be kind of nice to start plucking around with some of that and get y'all can learn with me, but also get other folks interested in that rabbit hole. Because there's, if only just to make the experience in Linux better, I could see Chromium embedded being worthwhile, because the value of a web view is, I guess, primarily security updates, and every app doesn't need to embed it. So smaller files, like those are probably the big use cases. Linux doesn't really benefit from either of those. So, yeah, maybe just ship Chromium embedded along for Linux. And then there's also like very performance sensitive use cases where the web view implementation might have issues relative to like running in Chromium. So I don't know that it'll ever be the default, but if we could get Chromium embedded running somewhere, that would be kind of neat to play around with. I know a couple of folks have made some progress on that as of late and over the past handful of months. So coming up, if y'all have any other ideas for things we want to go through on stream, we'll probably keep coming back on to this to-do app on and off. It's a fun thing to poke around, and we get a bunch of little Tauri bits within there as well, and then touch on some other parts that I'm interested in. I've really been digging and diving into Starfx as of late. It's been I've got it in a few places. It's fun to use, and it's very flexible, which I think lends to that. So I can do some things that wouldn't normally be handled by just an off the shelf library like this. The way it manages and handles tasks makes for some like a really interesting flexibility with it, which is fun. Yeah, so I think this is where we're going to leave it. Have a happy Tuesday. Good rest of your week. And I'll get the stream scheduled for next week. We'll do I guess we're going to do some raw WebSockets. Really? Is that what we're going to do? See you then. Bye.